Madam Speaker, we ask who's responsible for fixing the housing crisis? Why haven't they done so effectively? The issues are many and they seem to be moving. New people move in, numbers are hard to pin down, backlogs in provision, how to make sense of all of this. I'm going to start with Rory, and I know your colleague Tebogo wanted you to kind of fill in some of the blanks for us. Maybe just respond on the issue of how competent the plan is to meet different stratas of need, both in the inner city and other places, in cities like the city of Johannesburg, in terms of housing.
Well, the way the system is designed is if the poorer you are, the more support you get from government. The less poor you are, but you can't afford to get a bond, the less support you get from government. So the big question here, and just listening to my colleague from the inner city, is how far can you actually stretch the rand? Because the South African government has so much money. If you were to cancel out the entire backlog now, because the backlog at the moment is about 2.3 million units altogether.
This is nationally?
Nationally,
okay.
Yeah. Now, if you were to cancel out that entire backlog, you would need today about between 620 and 650 billion rand. If government doesn't have 650 billion rand, there's always going to be a gap between what it can spend and what it still needs to spend. The human settlements budget at the moment, what this country can afford, is about 34 billion rand a year. Well, the budget for this year that's just started is about 34
All right, so it's going to be a constantly moving target, and as I think Tebogo was saying, places like, in Gauteng, 100,000 new people, I'm told, every single year
Correct.
come into the city.
Correct.
You do have a challenge, and that's a given.
Yeah.
So where are the low-hanging fruits for success? I mean, do you exploit or do you marginalize those who are already severely exposed by getting them out of buildings so developers can come in and develop those and you can get some money that comes back into the coffers? Or do you make provision for them in this context?
No, in fact, most of the metros have a very pro-poor housing policy, especially in the inner cities.
Okay.
Cities like eThekwini, the various cities and towns in Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg, they have a pro-poor. So my organization alone, which only makes one contribution, in the city of Johannesburg alone last year, approved money for a further 1,200 units in the inner cities.
And these are the most exposed, to the most exposed people that Siyabonga is talking about.
The inner cities often have a lot of very exposed people who are self-employed, who are hawkers and sell goods like that, yeah.
Pro-poor is what what government is saying. Manda, in your experience at Seri, is it that?
So I think Sia and Lerato can later add to this point, but what we've experienced at Seri is that there has been a bit of an effort to push for evictions. So a large part of Siri's work is titled under the theme Securing a Home, and we are pushing for the constitutional right for people to have access to adequate housing. A lot of this has to do with blocking evictions that will lead to homelessness. In many instances, what we have seen from the city has not been necessarily a pro-poor approach. I think maybe in the way that Rory is explaining it. 50% of the people in Johannesburg, according to from the 2001 numbers, earn less than 3,200 rand a month. And so when you're talking about poor, you're talking about that as your minimum level and having to work down from that. So pro-poor would be allowing access to actually affordable housing, as Sia had said, where people are able to afford rentals that are, including utilities, less than 30% of their total income.
So how much of that, back to you, Rory, of that consignment are you providing for?
You see, the way the model works is it cross-subsidizes. That's why I said in order to fund the people in the lowest category, earning 3,200, some of the people living in inner-city units earn 1,500 rand a month. But for the system to work so that government doesn't have to put an operating subsidy in, there need to be enough tenants in the categories above that up to 15.
And when you don't have enough, what happens? I mean, does it lead to evictions because you must get rid of people, then you must find another route to make money?
It is true, but then what government does is they have other programs that they try to accommodate through. So people displaced and people who can't afford to make a monthly payment, like pay rates, for example, they normally go and are accommodated through the BNG program.
Okay, but it doesn't seem to work, because I know Sia will say it's not working in quite that format. Lerato, let's bring you in. Slovo Park settlement, I think for about a decade or so you've been fighting with government for better services, for recognition, for an uplifting of the lived situation that you experience. You had to go to court and you made some gains in the High Court. But very quickly, talk to us about how, when we talk about a housing crisis, it affects people in your community.
You see, maybe first let's start as to why did we end up going to court. Is that Slovo was already 25 years old as an informal settlement. And at that particular time, we were now about to be evicted 11 kilometers away from where we are currently residing.
And for living for, 2 decades, you settled there, this is home, you made your life there.
And within the 25 years, there were so many promises and assurance thereof to say there is development coming from government official, of course. With all these particular promises, but none coming forth, we then decided that now that we are forced to be moved to Univale, the other side of Vlakfontein, we then decided to go to court.
Okay.
But what we then realized when getting to court is that within the housing policies, the land tenure options, there are policies that had not been exhausted in South Africa at all.
Like which ones? Very quickly, just highlight
like
those
the
ones.
UISP. UISP has not been implemented anywhere in South Africa, although it was amended and adopted in the late 90s, where it says it's an in-situ upgrade people where they are. But we tend to go for greener field where we are developing elsewhere 10,000
houses. Okay, well, let's talk about that, because as Lerato was saying, they've had to go to court. They exhausted all of their options with local government representatives, and nothing happened. They went to court. And finally, I think government's hand's been forced. There's a multi-million rand project upgrade that has to, or money that has to be allocated to the redevelopment of your community. Am I correct?
We had to even assist in trying to unpack the UISP and its directive, because after the judgment, the housing was saying we are developing 399 houses, without even acknowledging to say how many people are here in this particular settlement. To find that the houses, the population that is there, basically shacks that would talk about 3,734 households, whereas they wanted only to develop 399.
Okay, so here's a living, breathing situation where people have been living in a situation that could have been planned for, 2.5 decades, basically living in the same situation. How does the work that you do and the work that Rory do intersect in affecting the lives of people like Lerato and Slovo Park?
I think it is a bit unfortunate that the city is not here, or even Josco, but what we do as the HDA and also working with organizations such as SHRA is to ensure that the informal settlement upgrade program, which upgrades communities in situ, like he was saying, so you can actually have an upgrade in the place where you're in. If there is not enough land available for that upgrade, there's relocation options. Half the time you find that that's where we find resistance, when people have to be relocated.
But do we not have new ideas? I mean, Siyabonga, are there other ways? I mean, what opportunities have you seen through the experiences that you have had for government to tackle this, all the agencies to tackle this problem differently and effectively?
I think the way that we can work this and tackle it in the right way is just that if they can give us, as the poor people, the chance to run those projects and look after those buildings. Because if you can go around the inner city, they will say these are bad buildings, these are these buildings. We've got water, we've got electricity, we are trying to pay for those things, even the security is there.
Yeah, but what about when the buildings are dangerous to live in, when they're falling apart and there might be a fire hazard, Siyabonga?
I think they have to intervene on the earlier stage.
Right.
The reason why the building end up in those situations is because when we are trying to negotiate, as my colleague Lerato says, out of court, they don't consider that. They want to hear from the court what they have to be done.
Okay, I'm going to come back and talk about what room and scope there is for collaboration between those who are living in some of the dwellings or areas that are earmarked for eviction, the collaboration between those groups of people and government organizations. We'll get some closing comments from my guests. This is Madam Speaker.